Today's gospel sparked in me the memory of a trend, a question carried in the cryptic initials WWJD. What would Jesus do? Embossed, engraved, woven into bracelets worn by many. A very little bit of research revealed that the phrase was coined by author Charles Sheldon in 1896. It was the subtitle of his very popular book, In His Steps, What Would Jesus Do? Beginning then and through many revivals, most recently in the 1990s, it has been used to interrupt the status quo and root people in the incarnate Word that is Jesus. That question can be a helpful guide in making all sorts of decisions, but I think it needs a foundation, and that's what brought me to today's gospel. I believe we need to start with what did Jesus do before moving on to the speculation of what he would do. No better place to start than with this gospel and the actions of Jesus. What did Jesus do? I'll start with what I see in here, and then it will be your turn. So Jesus and the disciples came down the mountain and began to go through Galilee, but he did not want anyone to know it. Jesus got out into nature, did some walking, went to a high place for clarity of vision, was part of a community. Also, Jesus needed and took time for himself, time to be out of the public eye. He was using the walk to teach his disciples, saying to them, the one who was sent for humanity is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. 3 days after his death, he will rise. Jesus was teacher to the core and didn't miss an opportunity to instruct the disciples. He did not mince words. He spoke the whole truth. The disciples did not understand what Jesus was saying, but were afraid to ask him. Jesus hung out with people who did not understand him, who showed up anyway, and were so human that they didn't want to let on that they didn't understand. People like us. They returned to Capernaum, and once inside the house, Jesus asked them, "What were you talking about as we walked on the way?" At this, they fell silent, for on the way they had argued with one another about who was the greatest. Jesus was about meaningful conversations, about giving people opportunities to speak their truth in an accepting, non-judgmental environment. Unless they were whisper arguing, it is likely that Jesus knew the answer to his question before he asked. But he didn't assume. He gave them a chance to answer. Whatever that answer was, Jesus called them into a circle and taught them again, saying, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." As we heard last week, Mark's Jesus asked the question, "Who do people say that I am?" and got a variety of answers. And then the final answer, the complete answer from Peter, the Messiah. This Messiah label carried a lot of baggage throughout the centuries. Expectations of power and might, legions of soldiers on horseback to restore or destroy, or in some way bring about the vision they held of God's eternal justice. Jesus takes the opportunity to turn that long-held image upside down. The first is now the servant, the one who might feed the horse or offer water to the soldier. Head bowed, not speaking, best if not noticed at all. The Messiah as servant. Then Jesus called a little child to stand in their midst and embraced the child. This sounds like a very sweet encounter to our ears. I think of my niece, my dear godchildren, and the many times I have wrapped them in my arms with joy. We who are rich, white, and privileged expect our children to outlive us, to have opportunities that we did not, to fulfill at least some of their many dreams, and maybe some of ours. Things were a bit different in the first century. Some children were regarded as precious gifts and treated well, but many were not. All were considered the property of their father. As such, their ability to contribute to the economy of the household gave them their status. Illness, poor nutrition, and poverty often predicted a short life for children. More than half never reached puberty. Families could be large to establish a needed workforce against the sadly inevitable deaths. Children were expendable. This is who Jesus the servant called from the edges into the center. A human with little value, ignored until they reached a certain age. The disciples must have been beyond surprised with this action, and then fully stunned when he said, "Whoever welcomes one child such as this in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." Jesus loves children and practices the hospitality of God's love by embracing a child. According to theologian Kent Hughes, Jesus affirms the personhood of children, as well as the spirituality and spiritual capacity of children, when he welcomes, heals, and blesses them throughout his ministry. To me, this last action of Jesus in today's gospel is the most important. We are called to refocus our attention on the many needs of children in the world. We are called to repair the breach of inequities in housing, education, nutrition, and safety right here in our metro home. We are called to do our homework, vote, speak up, and speak out for children and their caregivers. We are called individually and communally to be the welcoming presence of God to those who don't matter in another's eyes. This action of Jesus also reminds us we are that child, called to be embraced by God with us, Jesus. We are meant to depend on the Holy One with the helplessness of an infant, a notion held in tension with the independent expectations of our culture. Inclusion and hospitality are two Jesus actions that challenge me in this text. What about you? What actions of Jesus inspire your actions? What actions for children do you pledge to take?